Okay, back again with Nigel Furness, not Farage, Furness, in
Not that
Brighton,
one.
our experienced activist from 1964, becoming involved in the local politics. And as we saw last time, it's a journey really through various stages of a political life, from early radicalism with the Communist Party, trapping Ted Heath in Shoreham Harbour under a D notice, so you won't know about that. Followed on by a move over eventually into conservatism, and then disillusion really with all the various groups until eventually finding direct democracy. But we're not going through that whole story again today. We won't cover that all. But I'd like to start pretty much where we finished off last time, towards after the Ted Heath affair really, and what happened with your life in the customs union as a customs representative, commissioned officer, I think it is the term, isn't it? You're on a commission.
Well, all civil servants, all customs and excise people were commissioned officers, but in actual fact, I wasn't an officer at all. I was merely a TA to begin with, a temporary assistant. That was confirmed as an assistant. That's the lowest grade. All I had to do was date stamp an initial J&F, all the import-export dockets. I had to cut out from the times the rates of exchange, make the tea. That was about it.
Yeah, I remember you saying so. How long after the affair with Heath, and you're continuing to work presumably at Shoreham Harbour, was it before you were? So it was suggested you might want to move on. What was the story with that?
The story with that was they kept moving me around. I started in the custom house in Southwick, a part of Shoreham Harbour. Then I was moved to Aldrington Basin up the Hove end, and then from there back to Southwick, and there the collector's office in Brighton, in Dyke Road, Brighton. And the reason they kept doing this was to break up the power base. When I say power base, there were only 11 of us in the union at Southwick, yet those 11 brought this whole country to a standstill. The miners like to think it was them what done it, but in actual fact it was when the civil servants, because this spread throughout the different branches of the civil service, everything was disrupted. If you can imagine, every branch of the civil service, nothing could get done. The Dole office, the DHSS, the Department of the Environment, all the different ones that work up in Whitehall at different times, and it was guerrilla tactics. We didn't all go out on strike. We worked to rule, and there were plenty of rules. ESTA code, short for establishment code. We had 3.5 rooms in the basement at Southwick Custom House with metal shelves, filing shelves, and stacks and stacks of about so thick brown envelopes, all with, we got any number of them every single day.
Soviet-style bureaucracy.
Soviet-style bureaucracy.
It was of the day, really, wasn't it? It was, right, because paper ran.
Well, it was the establishment code, because of the tinkermania of politicians.
Yes.
They can't stop making themselves look important. Legislate, legislate, legislate. Somebody has to go through that and interpret it. The only trouble was nobody ever did.
No.
Oh, if you've got a spare minute, just read a bit of the ESTA code. Public money paying for that.
Yeah.
Think about it.
So what happened with your communist activities whilst you were there after the Ted Heath affair, and how did that affect you?
Well, I was invited onto the Central Committee. I think that would have been in 1973. I'd have been about 23 or maybe 22, coming up to 23, rapidly advanced onto the Central Committee because they'd spotted my potential. And that caused somewhat of a clash with the, unions such as the AEF, the Amalgamated Engineering Federation, of which Reg Birch, the chairman of the Communist Party of Britain, Marxist-Leninist, Reg Birch, was also the boss of the AEF. And of course,
I'm thinking more about as well with the government, what eventually happened with your activities, because you worked your way up through this communist system, as it were, and then drawn attention to yourself, obviously.
Oh yeah.
What activities did the government use to try and control you or maneuver you?
They kept saying that if I were prepared to be cooperative, I might find rapid promotion. Well, I wasn't the slightest bit interested in rapid promotion. I said, I believe that's the first I ever said, my principles are not for sale. Then came, that was the iron fist within the velvet glove. Then came a meeting with Mr. Ian MacDonald, sent down from Westminster, the very same man who used to make the funeral announcements on television a few years later during the Falklands War to tell us of the latest casualties or the sinking of the Belgrano. It's piercingly cold, blue, ruthless eyes.
Very famous presentations he used to give, weren't they?
Oh, very. Oh, yes.
Very droll.
Very droll, but very menacing. Now, I had to attend this meeting, the Alderton Basin Custom House, and this Ian MacDonald. It always struck me he had this pen. It looked gold, it might not have been. It was a very expensive pen. And he said, I'd ask you to respect what I'm about to say. And he started reading out, and he was reading from some script. At precisely 11:30 a.m. today, you will resign your commission in Her Majesty's Customs and Excise. I will not resign, said I. This happened 4 or 5 times, and each time a little bit more menace and slightly leaning forward with those horrible eyes. You will, I repeat, resign, and I repeat, I will not. Then suddenly, the whole attitude changed. With this pen, a stroke of this pen, said he, I could advance you 4, maybe 5 rungs up the civil service. You could have a glittering career at Westminster. It's yours for the taking if you're prepared to cooperate with us. I said, again, my principles are not for sale. I said, presumably there's an alternative. And I remember he just flipped this pen, put it away, leaned forward and said, do take care, he stood up, lest you should meet with some sort of unfortunate accident. Good day to you. And he was gone. Subsequently, over the years, in 1980 and again in 1997, 2 traffic accidents where the drivers did not exist. The phone numbers they given did not exist. The addresses did. There was no one to be found. They're empty properties. Coincidence? I'll leave you to draw your conclusions.
That happened twice. So the first one was about 7 years later?
That would have been, 1980, 97, 17 years later.
No, the first of them, because you said 1980, was it?
1980.
Yeah. And
I can tell you the exact date,
the
the 11th of April, 1980. I had just come back from signing the final contract on the second house I purchased. It didn't occur to me what this might be. Of course it didn't. I thought, well, I'm part of the establishment now. I'm a Conservative, I'm a property owner, I'm a landlord. But it seems to me the one thing they didn't want either is me having my hands on money.
Very interesting. So
Isn't
we'll
it?
have to get to that part, because obviously you were threatened 7 years before that, was it? 73?
No, I was threatened in 73. Yes, it was 7 years. You're
yeah.
quite right.
Yeah.
7 years before.
Okay, so what did you take that seriously? I mean, this is a very senior official. You're talking about a senior member of the civil service.
I did take it
who
seriously.
became famous later.
Oh yes, I took it seriously. I made sure, and I mean, I've been in the habit of being very careful when I walk about. I would never walk. There's the road, the pavement behind you. I'll never walk in close to walls where there are doorways where somebody could spring out. I walk out on the edge of the curb and I make sure I'm in brightly lit places. Oh, I took it seriously.
So 2 years after you were injured in a traffic accident,
very
you then had the
badly
Falklands War, and this face popped up.
Yeah, and instantly it literally sent a shudder down my spine. Those eyes, I cannot describe. Evil, ruthless, utterly ruthless.
I mean, it's a serious allegation to make.
Well, it's a true allegation.
Exactly.
As
so,
God's my witness, and I do believe in God. As God's my witness, that is the God's honest truth, and I wouldn't say that lightly.
Well, there we are. That's another interesting aspect of your life here in Brighton, and the political shenanigans that you've been part of in terms of as a victim of as well, by the sound of it. Yeah. Now, what investigation was undertaken of that first accident?
Here's the funny thing. I drove along Old Shoreham Road, heading west. I was going to Sharpthorne Crescent to the owners, previous owners of the house I just purchased. There were no temporary traffic lights outside what used to be the football club, the old Goldstone ground.
Oh, right, yeah.
When I came back along, I came out of Benfield Crescent. I was heading east, dual carriageway, and all of a sudden, and I'd looked very carefully to my right, nothing coming. I just glanced in the rear view mirror, and there was a car directly right on my tail, and what looked like dead eyes I could see in the rear view mirror. And I kept gesticulating, keep back, keep back. And the trick I always used to use, if people got too close, flip on the lights. So they think, oh, it's the brake lights. Nothing worked. I will admit, when I came to the traffic lights at Stackpole Road, Neville Road, they were just going on to amber. I put the foot down, thought, quick, get this idiot off my tail, he's going to cause an accident. And then, of course, you have a slope down into the valley, into Goldstone Valley, temporary traffic lights. So I just went into neutral. You're not meant to, but that's what I used to do to save wear and tear on the brake pads. Next thing you know, there was this almighty crash and jolt. I went to look in the rear view mirror. It was buckled right up onto the ceiling. And I was sent flying through the air. But a policeman, plus my insurance broker, who was a prominent member of the local Tories and a great supporter of mine, a real Thatcherite. Two weird coincidences. The police then took, the braking, the rubber on the road from the car behind, and said, you're lucky to be alive because he was travelling at 61 miles per hour. That's what they've worked out. And you have been hurled 60 feet through the air. It was a Vauxhall Chevette.
Through the windscreen?
No. Because there was no seatbelt law. There were seatbelts. As a matter of interest, the policeman had asked me, were you wearing a seatbelt? I said no, and of course this is what's helped to further wreck my spine and particularly my neck, is because seeing this car in front looming up, I pushed down on the steering wheel, so you can imagine what that's done. That's not helped me at all. I was hurled into and on top of, wait till you hear this, a customised Mercedes, the real old type German Mercedes, built like a tank, said the police. That wasn't damaged at all. The front of my car was so crumpled up, the door was crumpled up.
So it wasn't the guy behind you that rammed you, it was someone else coming from the other direction?
No, it was the guy behind that rammed me, and the police could not understand, because I can't remember what that was. Not a Corsair, some kind of a Ford, not an Escort. I think, I can't be sure. I think it was it wasn't, behind that there was a little Interflora minivan, delivering flowers, with a lady at the wheel, very shaken. And he had hit, the guy had hit the back of my Vauxhall Chevette so hard, he had bounced off and written off her car, crashed all the front of her car as well. Bizarre. And I mean, I kicked, and it just goes to show the adrenaline when you're involved in an accident. I was so angry, so I thought, you bloody idiot. I knew this would happen.
But I mean, you weren't wearing. Did you go through the windscreen at the front of the
No,
car? Well,
because I forced down on the steering wheel.
So the car was thrown 60 feet?
Yes.
Wow.
Not only through the air, because it's the... I mean, I'm not kidding you. It's like something you see in a movie. You know, it was only seconds. It seemed like an eternity. I was bearing down the steering wheel like this, and I could see the car come, not only into, but the front of my car was up on the bonnet, sort of roundish bonnet. Those very old, really sturdy. Yeah, Mercedes, German engineering. All very odd, isn't it?
No, it is. But it's a very strange twist in your story, isn't it? So let's go back to when you had that warning and the events after that, because you were then looking at... You took the warning, you understood that you're obviously on notice. Did you just stay in the customs after that anyway and carried on until eventually you saw the light with conservatism? What happened there?
No, I stayed on for a little while because what happened was they called the police. And there was only me in the custom house. It's very early in the morning. Next thing, 2 policemen came in. I said, "What can I do for you?" "We've come to arrest you." I said, "I don't think so." I said, "I have a suspicion." I said, "that you might be carrying about your person some illegal substances." I said, "Would you step through here while I don the rubber gloves?" "He can't do that, Sarge," said this young copper. "Come on, we're out of here," said the sergeant. You see, people didn't realise. I made it my business to study the Esther Code and find out just what privileges certain classes of the civil service have. They're untouchable, or virtually.
Like the old clerics, you know, the clerks and the clerics.
Much
you know,
like,
your own law code, ecclesiastical law.
Oh yeah, but people, you see, there's so much we don't understand in this country that's hidden in plain sight.
I wonder if that still applies, but it's interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I would imagine that Mrs. T, you know, with all the union legislation, it may well have ordered. I know not.
Right.
But
equal under the law.
Equal, yes. Believe that one, and you'll believe anything.
All right. So that was obviously a harassment incident. You know, immediately after the warning, just to give you the message, presumably, obviously.
Oh yes, it was only minutes later that 2 police turned up, and I knew damn well that they had no power whatsoever to arrest me. In actual fact, I remind them, "You are trespassing on Her Majesty's land."
But they made their point.
They didn't hang around long.
No, but they were showing you what could happen, and that's what the powers that be.
Yes, and I was showing them I didn't give 2 damns.
So what happened after that in terms of your
Well,
life
what
in
happened
the customs?
after that was that... Now, what was it? There's a little bit of a blank. I got a letter from, you know, with the portcullis. I'll have to look up my files on this. And they... How did they manage to get me out? Just, you know, there's a little blank, I'm sorry to say. I'll have to check that out. But suffice to say, they did. But I kept getting checks. Yes, checks in the post. Not huge amounts of money, about 150 here, 180 there. But considering I was only getting about £13 a week at that stage, and they kept saying it was to do with the pension, the civil service pension. I had a feeling it was some sort of hush money.
Yeah.
It didn't go on for more than about 4 or 5 months, but a good few checks came through, unsolicited by me.
Wow.
Curious, isn't it?
So how long after that incident with Mr. McDonald was it that you actually left? Can you remember what year? 74? 75?
It was 74. I was still there in 74, and I then promptly got myself a job, yes, wait for it, in the civil service. 3 times I did this and got away with it. Never lasted long. First and foremost with the Dole office at Upper North Street. That only lasted a few weeks, and then I was called into the office and told, and I hadn't been told I was actually blacklisted for employment in this country. There's another thing comes back to me.
They told you that?
Oh, yes.
In this country?
Oh, yes.
Not just the civil service?
No, everything. Blacklisted. Thank goodness there was such a thing as cash is king, and there still is, and we're still fighting to save it. There are people who will take you on,
Yes.
not on the books, and I
Yeah.
freely admit it. What other choice
Yeah.
had I? Nor to earn a living.
Well, you're not in the famous book of all of the blacklisted Hollywood stars, are you? Or the Hollywood directors or writers?
No.
No, but there was a blacklist here sometime after that McCarthy era.
Oh, the McCarthyism, yes, absolutely.
Right.
But I then managed, from there I managed to, I mean, it just goes to show you that in those days, it may very well be the case today, the left hand of government has no idea what the right is doing. I promptly turned up in the Department of Health and Social Security next to the police station in John Street, Brighton, on Edward Street. Not content with that, same thing happened, and it took only about 3 weeks, I think, before they suddenly realised, shock, horror, what's he doing in here?
Yeah.
And of course, straight away I was unionising. Next victims were, I've done everybody's favourites, Her Majesty's Revenue.
Yeah.
But merely sorting through a temporary job, the files of the deceased down in the bowels of the building, and that was in that same building, Upper North Street, up on the top floor and down in the deep basement.
The bowels.
Yes, and I managed then, but that only lasted about 4 days, I think, to get over in, what's that little street, Arundel Street, behind Arundel Terrace in Kent Town, next to the Bush pub. There was a little, very small office of the Department of the Environment. Yes.
Small in those days?
Yes, tiny, infinitesimally small, good point you make. But I managed to worm my way in there before getting caught. But the best of it was, all these temporary people in the previous job, the tax office, I was telling them all my tales, regaling them with my tales of the customs and excise. Oh, what a hoop we were having up in the canteen. When we went back down to the basement, on each of our desks was a brown envelope. Suddenly, I was not so popular. Fired the lot.
What?
And I shouldn't laugh. It's not right of me to laugh. No, they fired the lot.
Were they temporaries or were they
temps?
They're all
So
temps
they
as well.
could. It's until
Yeah,
when it's TA,
Yeah.
6 months to prove yourself, which of course I always had.
Yeah.
After that, you become established.
Yeah.
Then it's the code, established from code. Etc.
Yeah. Wow. So you wouldn't have been popular.
No.
So was that your last post within the government?
It was, but I managed then to get myself employed at Southlands Hospital.
Right.
For the NHS.
Right, yes.
And I suppose I'd been there 6, 7 months, something like that, when I had the whole hospital out on strike. Somehow was rather persuasive as a trade union representative.
Was that straight after your period of kind of initial purdah had been completed?
Well, no, they didn't do that.
They didn't do that?
No, they didn't
Straight
do
in
that.
on the books?
No, they didn't do that. And then it was a succession of things, the Abbey Hotel,
Yes.
and that wasn't on the cards, you can imagine. And of course, being a taxi driver, and then I had another taxi which I used to get a guy jockeying for me as well. It would be quicker to say what I didn't do. And I managed, and all that time while I'm earning money, I mean, I used to do, for 7 months, 48-hour stints and sometimes longer, running the reception desk of the Abbey Hotel.
Wow.
Now, many people think the Abbey Hotel is what 40 Tales was based on, and I had an unfortunate resemblance, you can't picture that now, to John Cleese at that age, and I had no idea. I never saw television. I was too busy working, thinking, what on earth? This can't be happening. I thought at one point, the woman who got me the job, Mary, not a friend, became a friend, but she's an acquaintance. Oh, do you want a little evening job? And I thought, you bitch, Mary, where's the camera? I was convinced this is a setup. This can't be happening. This has got to be candid camera. Meanwhile, on came the TV programme, which I knew nothing about, 40 Tales. And people would come in and just look at me and, oh.
It's Basil.
No, nothing here for you. Off you go. Not realising, of course.
So that was like the mid-70s by now, you talking about 75?
That was, by that time, it was 75. It was about November 75 I got the thing. I was still working at the hospital, still doing the taxis and everything else, that will make money. Yeah. And I managed to save about £2,000 to buy my first house. Now, those were the days. A 22-roomed house. I now rent a very small part, but we'll come to that presently. 22 rooms, substantial rooms, solid, peak of Victorian brickwork, built in 1880, 11,750 quid.
So how long did it take you to get your deposit together then?
That would have taken me about a couple of years, would you believe? That's how hard I worked. I never stopped, and I wasn't spending. I wasn't in the pub. I love a pint. I wasn't in the pub. So.
Yeah. So you were becoming a little capitalist when you were doing this. Yeah. And did your mindset change when you were?
My mindset had already changed because I came to realise that it didn't happen overnight, but I came to. I think I ought to tell you that I was thrown out of the communists. I was expelled from the CPBML, but I have still in my possession to this day a letter typed out with the clenched fist bursting through the unjoined 5-pointed star CPBML from Reg Birch, the one I mentioned earlier on. Oh yes, formally expelling me. That was a decision taken by the Secretariat, which I was never on. That was the highest body, higher still than it's all bureaucracy in the Central Committee. But in handwriting, Reg was a very highly intelligent man, but grammatically, hadn't been educated. That's no disrespect. I admired Reg. But on the bottom, please, Nigel, we need you. Y.A. Reg. I never responded to the letter. I thought you couldn't put that on the bottom of the letter, and yet you've been spineless enough to let your hand be forced to write that letter. I thought, go to hell, and that really changed things.
When did that happen? 74?
1975.
75. And what was it over? What was the issue with that? The fact that you're working all these hours as a little capitalist, or was it something?
No. Oh, no. The point is, I still remained in the Communist Party after they managed to ease me out of the customs and I was still busy doing what I did very well, organising all the unions, getting everybody out on strike, and always guerrilla tactics. 1 minute this lot's out, next minute that lot's out, and they were just absolutely bombarded. Ted Heath was out by that time, of course. He'd gone in February 74 at the election, and he, in actual fact, won that election. Few people realise that the Queen asked him to form a government. I bet you didn't know that. And being Ted Heath, he threw a fit of pique if people couldn't see what he was trying to do to tame the unions, to vote him in of his own right without Her Majesty having to invite him to form a government. He threw a fit of pique and stormed out. That's how Harold Wilson came in. And the Tories still kept Ted Heath on as the leader. In those days, that used to happen. Wilson came back several times. It wasn't all this constant change we have now.
Like the football clubs.
Like the football, very similar analogy. And the second election was in October 1974. And Labour won them, but not by very many seats. It was all pretty dodgy. But then, of course, enter the milk snatcher, Mrs. Thatcher, and I won 100 quid by putting on a £1 bet. She hadn't even put her name down on the ballot paper. That was really when things changed for me. And I'll tell you exactly what it was that happened. I saw her in a TV interview, and she said Now, this was when she said I'd already got my bet on. But I don't know what it was. I thought, none of these are going to get it. Willie Whitelaw, the usual suspects. I thought this needs something radical for the Tories. And I thought, I wonder, because there were rumours, Mrs. Thatcher might make a good leader. She, of course, wouldn't comment. I went and put the bet down. No.
What was her shadow position again with the Tories?
She was the education secretary.
She
cut out the free school milk for most, not all. They called her the milk. Thatcher the milk.
Not when she was shadow, though. That was
when she was in power.
Oh, with Heath, of course, yeah.
Well, then when she did put her name down, I remember, and she said, loud and clear, the government of which I was a part made mistakes.
Yeah.
I'd never, ever heard any elected politician say those words, made mistakes. And I, for one, am perfectly prepared to shoulder my part of the collective cabinet responsibility for those mistakes. But were I to become, I don't think she'd actually completely said she was standing by that point, but were I to become the leader of the Conservative Party, rest assured I will do my damnedest to rectify those mistakes. And I thought, I like this. So there's honesty.
Yeah, and it was around that era, of course, that Vietnam collapsed.
It was all happening in 75.
And then so the communists were on the up, as it were, and in Angola, in Africa, and other countries, or other countries that communist presence was growing.
Oh yeah.
But you were seeing, and you had the Gang of Four with Mao, obviously in China. So when you saw all of these things happening, but you started to see the boat people leaving Vietnam soon after. Is this when you started to have second thoughts about communism?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well put, Neil. Because when that happened, now, despite I was going off the communists, I'd been kicked out anyway. But I well remember in 1975. In my mum's other house, I was sorting through all my dad's affairs. Dad had left and moved. And in the front room downstairs, there was television still, and I had that on. On came the ITN news, and I thought, oh, what's that? There was this little sort of red dot, it looked like, in the middle of the screen. It was actually a red star. And it was very cleverly done, just and the whole screen went red, and then you could see it was a map of Cambodia. People always make the mistake, think Vietnam fell first. No, it was the appalling Khmer Rouge who were the first, and a few weeks later, that was it. The Yanks pulled out of South Vietnam, and then the North Vietnamese tanks rolled in, and the shock horror, oh yes, all the people in Saigon putting garlands of flowers round the tank drivers' necks. How quickly they changed their opinion. Oh yeah. And it was a quite stunningly attractive 17-year-old girl emerged from the first tank. Now I remember that. Now, you wouldn't have thought I'd have been glad about that. But I wasn't going off the idea of communism per se. It was the CPBML. Because the reason I was thrown out was because I and others, who it's not fair to name them because they're still alive, others chucked out. We had the bookshop. We had a bookshop, and we had 4 rooms above and 1 out the back.
Yeah, we spoke about that last time, actually.
Oh, did we speak?
Yeah, we did with the lady.
So we don't need that, yeah.
Okay.
So I had gone off the CPBML because I will not tolerate child abuse or any form of abuse. And, how you can say, oh, it didn't happen, it didn't, oh, no. I can't. Yes, and
there's a thing on the left about that, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Sexual abuse is acceptable if it's the leader. Etc.
It didn't happen.
Was it the Socialist Workers' Party had a similar thing?
They had something, I can't remember the details.
He was abusing women for about 20, 30 years.
That was it.
Yeah. So,
that was it.
There we go. The trouble is when it becomes a fiefdom and a split off.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
But you see, the other reason I was delighted that in Indochina those countries fell to the communists was because I detest imperialism in any shape
Yeah.
or form. I'm an unavowed nationalist, and the interesting thing is the CPBML are still going, because I bumped into one of them a few years ago outside the Labour Party conference on Brighton seafront, and he's still representing the NUT. He will remain nameless. But he gave me his details, and I gave him my details. I now regularly get sent the CPBML. What used to be called the Worker is now called Workers. So there's obviously been some kind of a split there, who had the 57-1 varieties, you know. But the interesting thing about them is they're still as nationalists and anti-EU and anti-globalism, work this one out, as ever they were.
And it's interesting because communism was always supposed to be this international movement, you know.
Not with the CPBML, it wasn't.
No.
It was the Trotskyites. It was the socialist workers. They didn't used to be called the socialist workers. Now, hang on. Their paper... Yeah, they were. Paul Foote, the nephew of Michael Foote.
Yeah.
Paul Foote, the Socialist Workers' Party. I'm trying to think what the name of their newspaper they used to sell was called. Now they've changed the name of whatever the party was to, I've got this wrong, to the Socialist Workers' Party.
Right.
There's the thing, the difference between Trotskyists and Stalinists. The difference is, it links really with the Stalinists knew perfectly well how to use guerrilla warfare. The Trotskyists, Arthur Scargill springs to mind, flash forward to 1984. Let's have one all-out assault, break the back of the mine,
head on, straight into
head
the
on,
guns.
straight in, go and let all-out troops get sold.
Yeah.
What difference between Arthur Scargill? I'd love to confront that man, I really would. And General Haig in the First World War. Answer me that.
Yeah.
Totally different tactics. And it's that Trotskyist side, this internationalism. They do not respect national boundaries. Now, a lot of Stalinists actually do.
It's interesting though, because as you say about the tactics, it was at this era that the Americans, who had been in the Weather Underground and these other organisations, you know, terrorist organisations, blowing up, you know, cash in transit vans and banks and other, you know, things, and killing policemen. They realised that wasn't going to work, so they morphed into basically taking over the education system through getting their placements into specific roles where they would be the ones designing the lesson plans and all the rest of it. So you got Bill Ayres, Bernadette Dawn, two survivors of a trial that they got through on a technicality, and others. That's what happened. So did you see this type of approach in the UK? Because obviously we've had Tony Blair, and who was a Trotskyist. You know, he's admitted that now. Did you see or are you aware of that?
Was being the operative word.
Yeah, well, but the point is, you know, have you seen that type of infiltration, do you believe, into our education system?
100%. Half my family are medics. I went down that road eventually. The other half of the family are teachers. Some of those in my family are very much Trotsky inclined. Others are the total opposite. And they're generally the ones, there's a few headmasters in my greater family, they're the ones who aren't so Trotskyite, funnily enough.
They can't what?
They're not so Trotskyite.
Right.
They're more common sense.
Right.
But of course, headmasters are not in the NUT. There's the, what is that? The head, women and head teachers, NAW.
But the teachers are specifically staying in those roles because they can spare their time then, can't they? For their political activities. The head teacher is absolutely swamped. Yeah. If you're a careerist, as it were, your career will take you on a path that will fill your day. But when you're a teacher, there is a lot more time available.
That's right. Who was the Pope? There was a Pope, and I can't remember which one. There was Stalin. I'm not sure if Hitler. There were three. And throughout the last few decades, I've heard that repeated many times. Give me a child.
Just a second. Stop on.
Listen, I need a quick pee.
Yeah, go on then. Yeah, we'll just
What
stop
you
here.
do?